So, when my husband was first telling me about your family, he mentioned that you all were previously a part of a cult.
Our entire foundation was based on Jesus only being a really good human.
Can you explain what life is like in a cult? Hi, and welcome to the Ordinary Brave podcast. We're so glad that you joined us today. And today I have a guest that goes to my church. And we actually recently met. They're newer to the area, newer to our church. And they have a really unique story. And my husband actually came home and was telling me about this family when they joined our church. And he's like, they have an incredible story. And I know that you're going to want to interview them. So I'm really excited about just letting her share her story. But today I have with us Elena Bunger. And she can tell us a little bit about how they ended up in Cookeville, but they started out west and they've gradually made their way and landed here in the area of Cookeville, Tennessee. So welcome, Elena.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for being here to share your story. And why don't you tell us a little bit how you have landed here in Cookeville? What brought y'all here? Where did you move from?
Yeah. So I was born and raised in Wisconsin, Green Bay area, and my husband was born and raised in Washington. And we met through our old church, and I moved out there, but we decided to make our home in Wisconsin, so we moved back there. We were there for 14 years almost, and with everything that we'll be getting into, the Lord called us to pick up and move, and that brought us to Cookeville, Tennessee, because of the kids' school. So that's
Yes.
where we found peace.
Yes, that's awesome. So, when my husband was first telling me about your family, he mentioned that you all were previously a part of a cult. Can you explain more about that or what life is like in a cult and why you would maybe consider it a cult?
Yeah, so from my understanding, a cult means that they're the only ones that believe that they're saved, right? They've got it all figured out, and if you don't do it their way, then you don't have any hope externally from that. So that's why personally I define it as a cult, but I was born and raised in it. My husband was he was adopted when he was 10 and a half, into a family that also was in the same, I don't even want to call it a church, because we didn't believe that this is this thing it's so antithetical to normal Christian life, the way that we were taught. Our vocabulary was different, which is a tactic of cults. That words mean different things, and that creates a barrier between you and everyone else when you're trying to talk to them, because we don't understand the same thing. Case in point, the big one, grace. We were told that that was unmerited favor. That was it. So we had favor from God. Like, if perchance something happened, that was grace. It wasn't anything about Jesus dying that wiped everything away. So our entire foundation was based on Jesus only being a really good human, a lot like Mormons and Islam. We believed Jesus lived and he was on earth, but we didn't believe that he was God incarnate.
Yeah.
We didn't believe in the Trinity. I didn't even know what the word Trinity was. So what happened was, in 2020, when everything was locked down in Green Bay, our schools were locked down as well. They had my then kindergartner at home on an iPad for 8+ hours a day. And I was working from home, and it was just untenable. He started first grade that way, and it was just, there was no end in sight. And by God's providence, my cousin actually knew of a classical Christian school that miraculously was surviving and thriving with no masks and no nothing. And
in Wisconsin.
yes, in Wisconsin. And I don't mean to make any political statements or anything like that, but it wasn't about health. It was about politics. And once I became a mother, they are the reason that we have been on this road, because I want the best for my children.
Mm-hmm.
So we found the school. He was enrolled and attending 7 days later after we heard of it. Like, it was just divine, really.
That's awesome.
And like you had mentioned, we were confronted by a statement of faith when we joined that we had to attest to. And that was the first time I had ever seen language that the normal Christian community just takes for granted, really. And I'm still astounded by it. Like the message we heard yesterday from your husband, just that, not that God doesn't care about our sin, but that's not the end of the story.
Mm-hmm.
That isn't what he focuses on. And it makes so much more sense now, because that's how I think about my own kids.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care about them, telling a little white lie or do the acting out or something like that. I care about their building character, them, who they are becoming as a person and where their heart is.
Mm-hmm.
And so really parenthood has given me more of the understanding of God's mindset and the path in which we could walk our way out of slavery, really.
Yeah. Wow. So when you guys found this school and they gave you a statement of faith, so, I run a classical Christian homeschool group,
Mm-hmm.
and I know we have some other classical Christian schools in Cookeville as well. But so just to be clear, like when we have our statement of faith, like we just tell people, like, you're not saying that you have to believe these things, but this is how the school believes. And when you bring your children to this program, you need to understand that this is the point of view that we're coming across, and
Mm-hmm.
or this is the foundation of the things that we're going to be expressing, and you need to sign saying that you understand that. Was it that same kind of thing, or were you having to say, like, we believe these things too?
It was that, but also you had to belong to a church that assessed, I can't think of the word,
or that accepted these same
yes,
beliefs.
Yes, that confirmed that same stuff. And so I think that it was a little bit more strict because
Sure.
they didn't want people believing other things because of the dialogue that happens in a classical context, and the theology behind it.
Which I feel like our private schools here that are classically Christian based, I think they probably have very similar standards,
Yes.
because I know that they require churches or like a pastor recommendation and that,
Right.
And that sort of thing. So what were some of the specific things, if you can remember, like in that statement of faith that just really struck you?
Well, the Trinity really was the major point. Being confronted with Jesus being part of the Godhead, if that's, and that's the other thing too, like the language, like I had said about words meaning different things, like really actually instead of applying what I had thought that those words had meant, going into what actually do these words mean to everyone else, like the general population. So it wasn't anyone with a typical Christian background would have even had an issue with, like, just the thought that God's infallible, inerrant word. I'd always believed that, but to be confronted with that so straightforward, it kind of is like, if you ever have those thoughts where they just like, they're suddenly so clear and it just like shakes you out of what your normal fog of life is.
Yes.
Was just, So is that, and that was just the beginning of our questions, because then we were surrounded by a bunch of people that were doing life with joy like we'd never seen before. So when you're in a high control, authoritative religion that is telling you you're the only ones, you'd think that we would have joy, but there was no joy. And that was mind-boggling to see so many people doing life so happy. But yet, that was in fall of 2020, and it just was like, God deals with people the way that he knows that they need to be dealt with. Some people need to be knocked over the side of the head. Other people need to just be gently led, small understandings. And God knew what I needed, and my husband too. And that is one thing. Praise God that I have a husband that went through it with me at the same time.
Amen.
There's another facet to the story we'll get to, but there's been a number of families that have been divided because of awakening from the cult, and it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Because at the same time, there's so much joy to seeing one more person saved. When that leads to a division, it's hard. But
yeah,
that's also what the good book says is going to happen.
that's true.
So
you've got this statement of faith that led to many more questions. So I'm assuming the school, accepted that y'all's membership in the church that you were in and allowed y'all in.
yes.
But that just led you to being around more people.
Yeah. So it's an interesting point about them accepting it, because we had no problems with it. But if you go online and try to look up what we belonged in, there's nothing out there, because that was another part of it. There's nothing written. There's no statement of faith. There's no web page that says these are our beliefs. This is what. There's nothing out there. So
What would you call it?
What would I call the church?
Yeah.
Internally, we called it the truth, which is ironic.
Yeah.
We'd also refer to it as the way. Externally, people that have left for simplicity's sake, we call it either the 2x2s, like 2x2, or tubas, Tubas, just because it's, the culture these days. It's also been called the Workers' Church, because that's the name that they use for their ministers and pastors, is workers.
How many people would you say? I mean, you mentioned your husband was in one state, you were in another
Yes.
state. So
it's
is this in all the states? I mean,
yes, it is in all the states, and it's across the world. It is decreasing in numbers, because really the only way they get new members is people have babies, because nobody would choose it. They say at the height, maybe there was 250,000, but it's probably less than 100,000 now.
okay.
And they're just small little things. Like in Green Bay, there was 2 different Sunday gatherings, and there were 15 to 30 people each at most. So it's very
Did they
small.
require you to dress a certain way?
Oh yes, there was many rules
Okay.
that were never written down, but when you're born and raised, you just absorb them as children do. Women were to never cut their hair and wear it up. No makeup, no jewelry, skirts always. Doesn't even matter if skirts were indecent for what you were doing. Always skirts, and preferably somewhere mid-calf. There was an image of what the proper woman was, and we know all those religions that you can think of. And it was a badge of honor to be thought odd and peculiar, because that's what the King James, which was the only one that we were able to study from, that's the language that it used, and odd and peculiar people. So, and the men weren't really stand out. Like they just maybe a little bit more clean cut, unshaven, but that's kind of changed now. But even I mean from little on, like, and then there's all the other subservient things that women were to take a second place, not be strong. If you were a strong woman, you were that was a mark against you.
Yeah, I'd have a lot of marks there.
Yeah, I had a lot of marks too.
I definitely have a strong personality. That's for sure. But that's the way the Lord has made me. But
Yes.
I am totally fine letting my husband lead, which is also something godly, I think. I mean, not saying I do it perfectly, but what I mean is I understand too that the husband is the leader. And all right, so let's get back to this statement of faith. I mean, you see this now. You're doing life with believers, and you are seeing a different lifestyle. I mean, what was that like conversion moment for you guys?
Well, they ended up doing an audit because there was another family in the school that had an issue with the science portion, and it was in the upper grades. And it came out that they had not been going to the church that they had said they were going to when they enrolled. And so, in order, and as it should be, they ended up just repaneling the entire school enrollment to ascertain, are you actually going to a Bible believing church that believes in the statement? And
how old are your kids at this time?
we had only one still there.
Okay.
So they're currently 12 and 7, and at that point he was in second grade, I believe, when they did that. Second or third. It would have been second grade. And so one of the board members actually called us, and we were like, what are you wanting to know? Because he had gone out online and looked to see what we believed, and because there's nothing out there, it's really everybody else putting their stuff out, like from membership that have left. And so there's a lot of different contradictions, and that was the first time I had heard about all these different like monotheistic and like God changing which person he was, and he was asking lots of questions that were just flying right by my head. I had never even heard of some of these terms. So again, back to the books and figuring out, what did these words mean? What did we actually believe? Because that was the thing. Every person could believe something completely different. There's husbands and wives that actually have different views on whether or not they're saved, their eschatology, their everything is different within the same household, because nothing is said outright, nothing is written down for you to know exactly, and it's not discussed either. Like, these are, if you would go to the workers, the ministers, and ask these questions, they would question your faith, because you're just supposed to follow their example. And that's why a lot of people call it the workers' church, because they're really in charge.
Yeah.
And then the complexity of that is every year, 2 or 3, depending on who you have assigned in your area, they rotate because they're itinerant. They don't actually have home or property. They can't get married. They're celibate, which is something we can get to because of what that does. And so you would get in a new pair because they went 2 by 2, like Jesus sent to the Jews,
right.
And that's where they get that from.
I think that's Luke 9. I think.
Yeah, Matthew 18 too, or
I know Matthew. Well, I can't remember the first part of Matthew 18. I know Matthew 18 also talks a lot about forgiveness and or how to reconcile with people.
Oh yeah,
but
that's what
it probably is
I'm gonna-
mentioned in multiple gospels.
Yes.
But I think I remember reading Luke 9 recently, and it was talking about the 2
Okay.
by 2s.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, it's mentioned a couple of places, but it's when Jesus sends out the disciples 2 by 2 to go, because you had to have that for the Jewish faith to be in. But they would switch out every year, or 2 years or 3 years, depending. And then it's what do they believe? What standard do they have? Like, it was like
it would change according to who's in leadership.
Yeah, it would shuffle the deck, and it really made.
So this guy from the board of the school,
yes,
calls you all,
yes,
ask you questions, and so then you decided you all really didn't know exactly what you believed. So did you go into the Bible? What did you do to?
Yeah, Bible, and then also talking with other people that we trusted and respected.
From the school, or?
Yeah, from the school, from our religion, and then just in life as general, because we didn't feel like we really could talk all that much with people internally, because when you question, your faith is in question. Which is absolutely astounding to me now, because Jesus questioned all the time. When he was asking people, or when he was talking to people, he was asking questions.
Yeah.
It's like, God doesn't have a problem with us asking questions.
I'm a question asker a lot too. I always want to understand.
Yeah.
And I'm also, I just think it's a good thing to ask.
Yes.
It is.
It is a great thing to be inquisitive, and I believe that was a gift that God gave a lot of us, a heaping dose of, and to live in a world where they had made it questioning evil, really, and then being a question asker intuitively. I lived in hypocrisy, really, for my first 42 years on earth. And then you really live in cognitive dissonance, because I knew that there was nothing wrong with me, yet it was so incongruous to how they said we were supposed to be. Being a strong woman, being a question asker, being analytical. So I had to shut all that off and just be one person when I was around church people, and I was another person in my life, and that creates a whole host of problems emotionally, and just the body remembers.
Yes. Yeah.
So you got a lot of stress all the time, and then because they didn't believe Jesus was God, we needed to perform at the level Jesus was on earth. He was our example and our elder brother, and we needed to be as good as Jesus. That's impossible.
Yeah. It's like that's a difficult task.
Yeah. With no grace to cover it, just heaping sin upon sin upon sin, because every second we're drawing breath, we're sinning.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, and with no grace to cover it, it is astounding that there wasn't actually more suicides and massive depressive. But a lot of people were like on antidepressants and stuff like that, quietly, because of course you weren't supposed to seek any help for that kind of stuff, because you were weak and didn't have faith if you didn't think. But the other thing that was astounding is you couldn't pray for natural things. That was not done. You didn't pray for good weather or a trip to be, without issue, or you didn't ask God to help you concentrate to study for a test. Like, that wasn't what you did. It was really...
So when you gathered on Sundays, what was being done? Was there preaching
Oh.
from the Bible, or was it just somebody kind of giving their thoughts about things?
Yeah, so it was the blind leading the blind, really. Our workers were not educated. They normally were called. They, whatever that personal feeling of being called is, you know, I assume it's like any other vocation where you feel like that's kind of where you're being led, but a lot of times it was just they didn't have any other life opportunities, so they went into that instead because in the hierarchy they were given place. If you sacrificed your life to become a worker, you were a step above. But in the actual Sunday morning, we called them meetings. I think there's a couple other religions that call them meetings, so they don't call them services or sermons. And we went to meeting. And the other people in the church, we call them friends. I think there's another religion or two that they call other people friends. So friends and workers. And so the friends would actually participate. Most of the time we didn't have workers in our meeting. It was only a handful of times in the year that you would actually have workers in your Sunday service. So it started out with him. Then everyone prayed. That was professing. That was another word that we used. You profess to know God through the workers, like you, whenever you felt led, if you're born or raised or whatever, you typically sometime between age 10 and 18, people stood up in a gospel meeting that they would hold, and you profess to follow, and that's when you would be able to pray and give your testimony, which is another word that they used and abused, which was really just your thoughts for the week, your service. So a sermon was not heard except for when the workers were in your area giving sermons, like once a week.
Did they come from the Bible, the sermons?
Well, as much as somebody's inane ramblings could, because they weren't educated, they didn't know anything about context, or they would just take sometimes a word out of it and just talk. Like it was really complete indoctrination and just regurgitating the same kind of stuff over and over with the thought that we needed to attend, always needed to attend, that the workers were the main sacrifice, or that we needed to have homes that were ready to, because they stayed in our homes.
Okay.
That's where they lived. They would go around to, and that it changed over the last 100 years, because it really didn't come to the United States until the late 1800s. And that was one of the things, too, that we learned. When we were young, we were told it came from the shores of Galilee. That was how old our religion was. It wasn't, we didn't take a name because Jesus didn't state a name. And we were better than everybody else because we just followed Jesus, and we were simple, you know. And come to find out, you know, it just was tradition.
Yeah.
And one guy's ramblings that they needed to go out 2 by 2 because he had some sort of epiphany back when, and for some reason, instead of like a normal cult has one leader, it kind of evolved and like became like self-cloning by families and stuff.
Well, this is very fascinating because it's radically different from anything I've experienced. But we're going to stop with this being part 1, and we're going to have you back for part 2. But we thank you so much for joining us today for the Ordinary Brave podcast and listening to Elena's fascinating story. We're going to dive even more deep into that life, her finding Christ, and then what the Lord's doing in their life now. And if you like what you're hearing, please like and share our podcast with others. We appreciate you being with us today.